Emma Harper was a woman who had it all, or so it seemed. At 28 years old, she was smart, beautiful, and successful. She worked as a marketing executive for a top firm, lived in a chic downtown apartment, and had dreams of building the perfect family. Yet, despite her polished exterior, there was one thing Emma couldn't seem to figure out: love. Or more specifically, how to get the kind of love that led to a ring on her finger and the happily ever after she'd been chasing. For 3 long years, she'd been with her ex, Ryan. The early days with him were exciting, full of promise. She'd envisioned the white dress, the shared home, the family vacations. But as time dragged on, it became clear Ryan didn't share the same vision. Marriage was never on the table for him. Emma had waited, dropping hints, having uncomfortable talks, hoping he'd change his mind. But he didn't. Instead, she spent 3 years in limbo, only to walk away empty-handed when she realized Ryan would never commit. That breakup had been a wake-up call. Emma told herself she wouldn't waste her time like that again. She wanted a husband, a family, someone who shared her vision of the future. Yet here she was, nearly a year into her new relationship with David, a 35-year-old lawyer who was handsome, kind, and distant. They didn't live together, they hadn't discussed marriage. And every time she tried to broach the topic, he skillfully dodged it with a smile and a change of subject. Emma was running out of patience. With each passing day, she felt the weight of time pressing down on her. She hated how society made her feel like she was on a clock, but she couldn't deny the ache in her chest every time a friend announced their engagement or posted baby photos on social media. She wanted that life, too. She deserved that life. And so, late one night, as she sat alone in her apartment scrolling through wedding accounts on Instagram, Emma made a decision that would change everything. If David wasn't stepping up, and if her ex had taught her anything, it was that she couldn't afford to put all her eggs in one basket. She would start dating other men, quietly, discreetly, until one of them showed her he was serious. Why should I limit myself, she thought. I'll stop when someone proves they're ready to build a life with me. Emma didn't see it as cheating. She wasn't married after all. And technically, David hadn't made any promises to her. She convinced herself it was practical, a way to protect herself from another dead-end relationship. She told herself she was simply exploring her options. But deep down, a small voice whispered that she was playing a dangerous game. Emma had always been good at multitasking, and dating several men at once proved no exception. She downloaded a few dating apps, created a polished profile that highlighted her best qualities, and set some ground rules for herself. No one gets too close. If anyone asks, the others don't exist. The first man to show real commitment wins. Her plan worked almost too well. Within weeks, she found herself juggling 3 men in addition to David. Jack, a 33-year-old architect with sharp cheekbones and a charming wit. He was adventurous and loved taking her on spontaneous outings, hiking trails, rooftop dinners, art galleries. Jack was easy to talk to, but something about him felt unserious. He had a playful edge that made her question if he was the settling-down type. Mark, a 37-year-old entrepreneur who radiated stability and success. He owned his own real estate firm, drove a Tesla, and seemed genuinely smitten with Emma. Mark made no secret of the fact that he wanted a family, but Emma couldn't ignore how overly polished he seemed, like every interaction was part of a sales pitch. Was he too good to be true? Luke, a 31-year-old teacher with a kind smile and a passion for helping others. He didn't have the wealth or prestige of the other two, but Emma found herself drawn to his warmth. Luke talked about wanting kids someday and seemed genuinely interested in Emma's dreams. But could he provide the life she wanted? Managing 4 men, including David, wasn't easy. Emma constantly had to juggle schedules, make excuses, and keep her story straight. She felt a twinge of guilt every time David called her his girlfriend, but she justified it by reminding herself that he hadn't committed to her. This wasn't about hurting anyone, it was about finding her future. But as the weeks turned into months, things began to spiral. Jack, Mark, and Luke were all falling for her, and David, despite his reluctance to talk about marriage, seemed to be growing closer too. Emma found herself caught in a web of her own making, unable to tell who was genuine, who was playing her, and who, if anyone, could actually give her the life she wanted. And then one night, everything changed. It was a cold Friday evening when Emma decided to cancel her plans with David in favor of a date with Jack. Jack had promised her a night out at an exclusive new rooftop bar, and she couldn't resist the allure of champagne and city lights. She texted David that she wasn't feeling well and promised to see him the next day. The date was perfect, almost too perfect. Jack was charming, attentive, and full of compliments. As they sat under the twinkling lights of the bar, sipping their drinks, Emma felt a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. But just as she was starting to relax, Jack's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his face tightened for a split second before he quickly flipped the phone over. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, just work stuff," he said, flashing her a smile. But his eyes betrayed him. There was something he wasn't telling her. Emma's curiosity was piqued. As Jack excused himself to use the restroom, she found herself glancing at his phone. The screen had lit up with a notification. "David, is everything set for tomorrow?" Her heart stopped. It couldn't be the same David, could it? Panic set in as she tried to piece together what was happening. When Jack returned, she forced herself to act normal, but her mind was racing. By the time the date ended and Jack dropped her off, Emma was shaking with anxiety. She needed answers. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with possibilities. Was Jack friends with David? Did David know she was seeing other people? Had the two of them somehow been in contact? The next morning, Emma's world came crashing down. She received a text from David. "We need to talk. Tonight." When David arrived at her apartment that evening, Emma could tell immediately that something was wrong. His usual easygoing smile was gone, replaced by a steely, unreadable expression. "Is everything okay?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. David didn't answer right away. He stepped inside, set his coat on the chair, and turned to face her. "How long have you been seeing other men?" he asked, his voice cold. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Emma," he snapped, his eyes blazing. "I know about Jack, and Mark, and Luke." Her knees felt like they were going to give out. How do you know?" she whispered. David laughed bitterly. "Because Jack is my cousin. And Mark, he's a client at my firm. As for Luke, let's just say the world is smaller than you think." Emma's mind reeled as she tried to process his words. How could this have happened? How could she have been so careless? She felt like the walls were closing in on her. "I trusted you, Emma," David continued, his voice breaking. "I thought we were building something real. And all this time, you were out there, auditioning replacements." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain. "I didn't mean to hurt you, David. I didn't know where we stood. You never talked about the future, about marriage. I didn't want to waste my time again." David shook his head. "So instead of talking to me, you went behind my back and lied to me? You think that's how you build a future with someone?" Emma opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She had no defense, no way to justify what she'd done. She had played a dangerous game, and now she was paying the price. The days following their confrontation were some of the darkest of Emma's life. David cut off all contact, and the other men quickly followed suit once they learned the truth. Emma was left alone, her once busy dating life reduced to a deafening silence. At first, she was angry at David for not committing, angry at the men for abandoning her. But as the weeks went on, she began to see things more clearly. She had been so focused on her goal, so desperate to avoid another failed relationship, that she hadn't stopped to think about what kind of person she was becoming. She realized she didn't just want a marriage. She wanted a partnership. She wanted honesty, trust, and respect. All the things she hadn't given David or the others. Emma threw herself into therapy, determined to understand her patterns and heal from her insecurities. It wasn't easy, but little by little, she began to grow. She learned to let go of her timeline, to trust the process, and to believe that love would come when she was ready for it. Months later, Emma was sitting in a coffee shop when she spotted a familiar face. It was David. He looked happy, relaxed, and he wasn't alone. A beautiful woman sat across from him, laughing at something he'd said. Emma felt a pang of sadness but also a sense of peace. She wasn't angry anymore. She had learned her lesson, and she knew she was on the path to becoming the person she needed to be, someone who could love fully, honestly, and without fear. And this time, she would get it right. Months turned into a year, and Emma found herself in a much better place emotionally. Therapy had worked wonders, helping her rebuild her confidence and teaching her how to be honest with herself and with others. She stopped focusing on her marriage deadline and instead focused on enjoying her life. For the first time in years, she wasn't obsessed with finding a husband. She poured herself into her career, took up yoga, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends. Yet, despite her newfound independence, love was still something she hoped for deep down. She was no longer actively searching, but she hadn't given up on the idea of finding someone to share her life with. One sunny Saturday morning, Emma found herself at a farmer's market, wandering through stalls of fresh produce and homemade goods. She loved the market for its lively energy, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the friendly chatter of vendors. She was examining a bouquet of wildflowers when she heard a voice behind her. "You know, those flowers really suit you." Emma turned and found herself looking into the warm hazel eyes of a man in his late 30s. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a kind smile. He held a bag of apples in one hand and looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Excuse me," she asked, taken aback. "The flowers," he said, nodding toward the bouquet in her hand. "They suit you." Vibrant and full of life, Emma felt herself blush. It had been a long time since anyone had complimented her like that. "Thank you," she said, unsure of what else to say. "I'm Nathan," he said, holding out his hand. "And you are?" "Emma," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle. Nathan had an easygoing charm that put Emma at ease almost immediately. They ended up chatting for nearly half an hour, wandering from stall to stall together. She learned that he was a freelance photographer who had just moved to the city, and he learned about her marketing career and her work at the animal shelter. Before they parted ways, Nathan asked, "Would you like to grab coffee sometime? I'd love to hear more about what you do." Emma hesitated for a moment. Was she ready for this? But then she remembered how far she'd come, how much she'd grown. She smiled and said, "I'd like that." Emma and Nathan's coffee date turned into a second date, then a third, and before she knew it, they were seeing each other regularly. Nathan was unlike anyone Emma had ever dated before. He was thoughtful, attentive, and open about his feelings. He made it clear from the start that he wasn't interested in playing games or wasting time. "I'm at a point in my life where I know what I want," he told her one evening over dinner. "And I want a partner, someone I can share my life with." His honesty was refreshing, and it made Emma realize how different things were this time around. She didn't feel the need to strategize or second-guess herself with Nathan. There were no games, no hidden agendas. For the first time, she felt like she could just be herself. But as her feelings for Nathan grew, so did her fear. What if she messed things up again? What if her insecurities and mistakes from the past resurfaced? What if Nathan found out about the person she used to be and decided she wasn't worth the risk? One evening, as they were sitting on her couch watching a movie, Nathan turned to her and said, "You seem a little distracted. What's on your mind?" Emma hesitated, debating whether or not to tell him the truth. But then she remembered the lessons she'd learned in therapy. If she wanted this relationship to work, she had to be honest, even if it scared her. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Something about my past." Nathan turned off the TV and gave her his full attention. "I'm listening," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Emma took a deep breath and told him everything. She told him about Ryan, about David, about the other men she had juggled in her desperation to find a husband. She told him about the lies, the betrayals, and the fallout that had left her heartbroken and alone. When she finished, she braced herself for his reaction. Would he judge her? Would he walk away? But Nathan didn't flinch. Instead, he reached out and took her hand in his. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "It sounds like you've been through a lot, but it also sounds like you've done the work to become a better person. That's what matters to me." Tears filled Emma's eyes as relief washed over her. "You don't think less of me?" she asked. "Not at all," Nathan said with a smile. "We've all made mistakes, Emma. What's important is that we learn from them." In that moment, Emma knew she had found someone truly special. For the next few months, Emma and Nathan's relationship flourished. They spent weekends exploring the city, cooking dinner together, and dreaming about the future. For the first time in years, Emma felt at peace. She wasn't rushing toward a goal or trying to fit someone into a mold. She was just enjoying the present, and it felt incredible. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One evening, as Emma was scrolling through her emails, she came across a message that made her stomach drop. The subject line read, "From David." Her hands trembled as she opened the email. It had been over a year since they'd spoken, and she had no idea why he was reaching out now. The email was short but shocking. "Hi, Emma. I know it's been a long time, but I felt I needed to tell you this. Mason, my cousin Jack's brother, ran into Nathan at a gallery last week. Apparently, Nathan used to date Jack, and things didn't end well. I thought you should know. Be careful." Emma's heart raced as she reread the email. Nathan had dated Jack, the same Jack she had briefly dated during her experiment. She felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Why hadn't Nathan told her? Did he know about her connection to Jack? Her mind swirled with questions. She couldn't ignore the possibility that David was trying to stir up trouble, but she also couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her gut. She needed answers, and she needed them now. That evening, as Nathan arrived at her apartment for dinner, Emma decided to confront him. "Nathan," she said, her voice trembling, "I got an email today from someone I used to date. He said you know Jack. Is that true?" Nathan's face fell, and Emma saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "Yes," he admitted. "I do know Jack. We dated for a while a few years ago." "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma demanded. "Did you know I dated him too?" Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I found out recently," he admitted. "Jack mentioned you when we ran into each other at the gallery. I didn't know what to do, Emma. I didn't want to ruin what we have." Emma's chest tightened. "So you were just going to keep it a secret? Pretend it never happened?" "I was going to tell you," Nathan said quickly. I didn't know how. I didn't want you to think it meant anything. My relationship with Jack ended a long time ago, and it didn't mean half as much to me as this does." Emma wanted to believe him, but the revelation had shaken her. Could she trust him? Or was this another sign that she was doomed to repeat the mistakes of her past? Emma spent the next few days in a whirlwind of emotions. She didn't know what to think or how to feel. Part of her wanted to believe Nathan, to trust that his feelings for her were real. But another part of her was terrified. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life, and she didn't want to risk everything on another relationship that might crumble. In the end, Emma realized she had two choices. She could let fear dictate her actions, or she could take a leap of faith. She invited Nathan over one evening to talk. As he sat across from her, looking nervous and unsure, she took a deep breath. "I've thought a lot about this," she began, "and I've decided that I want to move forward with you. But I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Nathan said, his voice earnest. "I need you to be honest with me," Emma said. "No more secrets, no more hiding things. If we're going to do this, we have to be completely open with each other." Nathan reached across the table and took her hands in his. "I promise," he said. "No more secrets. I'm all in, Emma. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a sense of hope. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she was ready to take the risk. Because sometimes, love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who's willing to fight for you, flaws and all. And for the first time, Emma felt like she'd found that person. This time, she was determined to get it right.